The Minister of State for Kampala, Kabuye Chopatogabe, says Chikubo and downtown arcades must not open before assessment. Now this comes after Ugandans have been waiting for so long to go back and work. We have the story in our bulletin today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nahaba Kajura, but first are the headlines. Leader of opposition Mpuga praises Museveni over new stance on vaccines. Isabel dos Santos to return Gulf shares to Angola. And in our sports today, Tokyo 2020 Olympic medalists nominated for Real Stars July Awards. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And Africa Today starts with one of our top stories. Now, the Minister of State for Kampala, Kabuye Chopatogabe, has asked city traders to stay home on Monday until their workplaces are assessed and allowed to operate. Now, speaking on Saturday morning, Minister Chopatogabe said that traders in Kampala will have to postpone reopening until an assessment is made. We have more on this report.
Addressing journalists at the Uganda Media Center in Kampala over the weekend, Minister of State for Kampala, Kabuye Chopatogabe, directed all the arcades around, including Nabugabo, Luumu Street, Ben Chiwanuka and the other arcades around, not to reopen their premises before assessment. The minister said that the arcades and malls can only operate after the Kampala COVID-19 task force assess the situation and issues them with a certificate. He said that the assessment process will take about 5 days if people cooperate. In his address on Friday night, President Museveni allowed traders in Chikubo and other arcades around the country to resume operations under strict guidelines but without kiosks and roadside sellers. President Museveni also emphasized that the traders must follow strict standard operating procedures or else the directive might be reversed.
Well, thank you so much, Harry Potter. Now, moving on, the leader of opposition, Mathias Mpuga, has praised government for heeding advice from the opposition on procuring vaccines directly from manufacturers other than relying on only donations from the COVAX facility. We have more on this report.
During his address last week, President Museveni said that he had directed the Ministries of Health and Finance to urgently secure vaccines for Ugandans from the manufacturers. Due to the holding of vaccines by the international countries, Museveni said that Uganda is embarking on its own vaccine manufacturing capacity, adding that to date, 3 candidate vaccines are at different stages of trial. Mpuga said that purchasing the drugs for Ugandans directly from the manufacturers would be a good move taken by the government. He said that they are glad that at a long last the government has woken up from their slumber and taken the path that countries like Kenya, Botswana, Egypt, and South Africa, among others, took to procure vaccines for their citizens. As of Friday last week, a total of 1,139,260 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine have been administered to the population countrywide. 902,293 people have received the first dose, while 233,950 have received the second dose.
Moving on, the Lands Minister Judith Nabakova has launched a national call center to help Ugandans report cases of evictions and land grabbing. Now, the call center will be relocated at the National Land Information Center in Wandegeya, and Nabakova said that this will be managed by well-trained officers to help people with land-related problems. We have more.
Speaking at the launch on Sunday, Nabakova said that for months, the Lands Ministry has studied cases of land grabbing, eviction and loss of property, yet leaders have failed to offer lasting solutions. With this call center, she said that now people will be able to report their grievances directly and get helped. Nabakova said that the call center will be operating 6 days a week. Nabakova also added that the call center will also help people who need information on ownership of land before they make payments to the seller. According to Nabakova, the number of the call center is 0800100004. Land in Uganda remains a precious asset that many will fight not to lose, and cases of land grabbing and evictions have been rampant in the recent years.
Well, thank you so much, Harry Potter. Now let's go for a quick break. We shall come back with more news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. In our international news today, as the Delta variant of COVID-19 continues to spread, many countries in the African continent have been struggling with a new wave of cases. Now in June, the continent suffered the fastest surge it has experienced so far, with a record of 1 million infections, according to the World Health Organization. We have more.
While richer countries have tackled rises in cases with large vaccine rollouts, Africa has faced a challenge with the amount of doses received nowhere near the amount needed to vaccinate the adult population. In Kenya's Kitui County, mourners grieved as a funeral was held for a 27-year-old woman who died from the virus. Nancy Ndanu Musyoka was also 7 months pregnant when she died. Her father Solomon Munyao believed that her life could have already been saved if there were enough vaccines and oxygen in Africa. While the US and European countries have vaccinated around half of their population, Africa is still lagging behind. Julius Oyugi, a virologist based in Nairobi, said that COVID-19 would likely continue mutating into new variants, posing a potential problem to vaccines.
Moving on, an international arbitration court has ruled that Isabel dos Santos, daughter of Angola's former president and Africa's one-time richest woman, must return to Angola her shares in Portugal's Galp Energy Farm, worth 422 million euros. We have more on this report.
Dos Santos is accused of diverting billions of dollars from state companies during her father Jose Eduardo dos Santos' nearly 40-year rule of the oil-rich southern African nation. The Embatode's first daughter, whose business assets have been frozen since 2019, was ordered by a Dutch court this week to return shares worth $500 million to Angola's national Sonangol Energy Group, which she chaired until Lourenco took power. The transaction under which Dos Santos acquired her stake in the oil and gas company Galp is null and void, according to a copy of the ruling seen by journalists by the Netherlands Arbitration Institute, which is part of the International Court of Arbitration. After paying a 15% deposit from the bank account of another company in the British Virgin Islands, Dos Santos allegedly paid the rest of the amount in Angola's local currency, worth a little outside the country, rather than in euros as agreed on the sales contract, according to the NAI. Dos Santos had consistently denied any wrongdoing and denounced all accusations as a politically motivated witch hunt.
Malian Prime Minister Choguel Kokakala on Friday presented his 2021-2022 government action plan to members of the National Transition Council in Bamako. He then paid tribute to the forces of change, the M5, the heterogeneous movement composed of political parties, unions and civil society organizations, which he spearheaded, and the security forces. We have more.
The Prime Minister addressed the members of the CNT, which currently serves as the Legislative Assembly, in an extraordinary session in Bamako, beginning his speech with a minute of prayer in memory of all the victims, Malian and foreign, of the crisis. He said that because elections are a process and not the final destination, they must work to rehabilitate them and make them credible. Maiga stressed that this is the meaning of the choice to be made by the government to institute in their country a single body for the management of elections, adding that this is a persistent demand expressed for decades by the political class and the civil society as a whole. Political functions in Mali and the foreign partners have been watching to see if the military-led interim authorities will stick to a promise to hold elections within 18 months since a junta toppled President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in August 2020.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. Now, moving on, almost 200 migrants were rescued off the Libyan coast by the SOS Mediterranean Humanitarian Organization on Saturday. Now, the 196 migrants, who mostly came from Syria, Eritrea, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Ghana, were rescued in 4 different operations. We have more.
In the first operation on Saturday morning, 57 people were rescued from a rubber dying distress spotted from deck of the SOS Mediterranean Ocean Viking ship. There were 28 women, among the rescued at least 2 of whom were pregnant, and 33 minors including 2 children under the age of 5. During the second operation, 52 people were rescued, some of whom had fuel burns. Another 64 migrants on board a wooden boat were rescued in the third operation with the help of the Sea-Watch Seabird aircraft. In the final operation, 22 migrants were rescued, most of whom were Syrians. The migrants are now all on the Ocean Viking, waiting to find out where they will be able to disembark. According to the United Nations Migration Agency, more than 1,100 people fleeing conflict and poverty in Africa and the Middle East have died this year in the Mediterranean.
Thank you so much, our reporter. Now let's go for a quick break. We shall come back with the business news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. In a business news today, Egypt's Foreign Minister Samel Shoukry on Saturday met with his Algerian counterpart Ramten Lamamra in Cairo. Now speaking at a joint news conference, Shoukry told reporters that Egypt is closely following the political turmoil in Tunisia in the wake of its president's decision to seize exceptional powers. We have more.
President Kais said the suspended parliament lifted the immunity of parliament members, fired the prime minister and took control of the executive branch, urging the need to save the country amid public anger at the government over joblessness, rising prices and one of Africa's worst coronavirus outbreaks. Autocratic leaders from Egypt to Saudi Arabia hope the power grab spells doom for the region's Islamists, but they also fear a reignited Arab Spring, like the region-wide uprisings kindled by Tunisia a decade ago. Shoukry said Egypt completely trusts the Tunisian leadership, but called it an internal affair. Lamamra, meanwhile, said that the dispute between Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt over the Nile Dam is passing through a critical stage. He urged for the three nations to come to an agreement. Egypt urges a decade of negotiations over the hydroelectric dam on the Blue Nile have failed to ensure that water will continue to flow downstream in sufficient amounts to Sudan and to Egypt, where 100 million people are dependent on the river as their sole source of water.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. Now let's turn your attention to our health news today. A drive-through center has been set up in the parking lot of the Houghton Mosque in Johannesburg in an effort to fast-track South Africa's COVID-19 vaccination program. The site opened this week and has been administering over 700 Johnson & Johnson vaccinations per day, according to organizers. We have more on this report.
According to Yassine Themba, the chairman of the Muslim Association of South Africa, the mosque was chosen on the basis that it would provide a space that people are comfortable with. He added that the location has allowed the team to vaccinate in a sterile area while also dealing with the hesitancy issues. Gauteng province, which incorporates Johannesburg, has increased the number of vaccination sites to 660 as the campaign wraps SUP. Musa Mashabela, Professor of Public Health at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, told journalists that the nationwide vaccination program has come a long way with many struggles, particularly with trying to get doses. He, however, said that since the government rollout began in mid-May, there have been steady improvements with around 200,000 people vaccinated each day. According to the Department of Health, 7,504,373 vaccines have been administered so far across the country.
Moving on in our sports news today, the Brave Stars Sports Agency is back with the monthly awards backrolled by Fortbet among other partners. Personalities from the fields of athletics, rugby, basketball and motorsports will be crowned on Monday, the 2nd of August 2021 at Route 255 Restaurant, Kampala in Lugogo. We have more on this report.
To have these awards back and special thanked the sponsors as well as those sports personalities who are actively involved in the games race. Katende Chavasinga reporting for TV Africa.
Well, thank you so much, our reporter. Now, before we end our bulletin, let's have a recap of our top stories. Leader of opposition Mpuga praises Museveni over new stance on vaccines.